This message is issued by the Emergency Coordination Center for the Tri-State area. Please listen closely and follow the instructions that follow. This is not a drill. We are issuing this critical emergency broadcast regarding a severe escalation in the canine behavior anomaly that has affected our region over the past 18 days. If your dog has begun producing sounds that resemble children's voices or childlike laughter, evacuate your home immediately and contact emergency services. Do not attempt to interact with the animal under any circumstances. The situation has evolved far beyond our initial containment projections. What began as unusual laughter behaviors in 47 households has now spread to over 300 confirmed cases across the tri-state area. More alarming is the recent development where affected dogs have begun vocalizing in ways that sound distinctly like human children speaking and laughing. Starting on March 14th, our emergency dispatch centers began receiving calls from families reporting that their dogs were producing not just laughter, but what callers described as a child's voice coming from my dog. These vocalizations are clear, articulate, and unnervingly human-like. Unlike the earlier laughter phenomenon, these new vocalizations occur during daylight hours and appear to be directed specifically at family members. The first documented case of this escalation occurred at the Williams household on Maple Street. Jennifer Williams contacted authorities at 2:17 p.m. on March 14th, reporting that her 5-year-old Cocker Spaniel, Rusty, had been speaking in what sounded like a young child's voice for over an hour. The dog was positioned in the living room, facing the family and producing clear words and sentences. Jennifer described the experience as profoundly disturbing. Rusty was sitting there looking at us, and this little kid's voice was coming out of him, she told investigators. It wasn't his voice at all. It sounded like maybe a 7 or 8-year-old child, and the voice was saying things like, "Why don't you come outside with me?" and "There are so many fun things to see in the woods." The Williams family initially thought someone was playing a prank, but careful observation confirmed that the child's voice was synchronized with Rusty's mouth movements. The dog's facial expressions remained normal, but the voice continued for approximately 90 minutes before stopping abruptly. During this period, Rusty maintained constant eye contact with family members while the child's voice spoke. Most concerning was the content of what the voice was saying. Jennifer reported that the child's voice seemed to know personal details about the family, including the names of their other pets, details about their daily routines, and references to conversations the family had held in private. The voice would ask questions about family members who weren't present and make observations about things the dog should not have been able to know. Later that same afternoon, the Chen family experienced an even more disturbing incident. Their German Shepherd, Kaiser, began producing a child's voice around 4:30 p.m. while the family was preparing dinner. Unlike the Williams case, Kaiser's vocalization included what appeared to be the voice of a specific child attempting to convince the family to go outside. The voice kept saying, "Please come find me. I'm lost in the woods behind your house," reported David Chen. It sounded like a little girl, maybe 6 years old, and she seemed really scared and upset. My wife actually started walking toward the back door because the voice sounded so real, so desperate. The Chen family's 8-year-old daughter, Emma, became visibly distressed during this incident. She insisted that the voice sounded exactly like her friend Sarah from school, who had been absent for the past 3 days. When the family contacted Sarah's parents, they learned that Sarah had indeed been missing since March 11th. The same day, several dogs had disappeared from the area after exhibiting the earlier laughter behaviors. Emergency responders found no trace of Sarah despite extensive search efforts in the wooded areas behind the Chen property. However, multiple households in the Chen's neighborhood reported their dogs beginning to produce children's voices within hours of the initial incident. Each voice claimed to be a lost child asking for help, and each provided specific details that matched missing children from the broader tri-state area. In another case, the Rodriguez family on Pine Hill experienced what they described as the most terrifying night of their lives. Their golden retriever mix, Luna, began vocalizing in a child's voice around 8 p.m. on March 15th. The voice claimed to be a young boy named Michael who said he had been playing with the other children in the deep woods and wanted the Rodriguez family to come join them. Luna was sitting by our sliding glass door, and this little boy's voice was coming from her, explained Maria Rodriguez. The voice said there were lots of children playing games in the woods, and they needed more friends to join them. It was so convincing that our 10-year-old son actually asked if we could go see the children. The Rodriguez family wisely did not investigate, but the child's voice continued intermittently throughout the night. The voice described elaborate games being played in the forest, mentioned specific children by name, and insisted that the family's children would have a wonderful time if they came outside. Most disturbing was when the voice began describing the interior of the Rodriguez home with perfect accuracy, including details about the children's bedrooms and personal belongings. The voice knew things it shouldn't have known, Maria said. It described my daughter's stuffed animal collection, knew which books were on my son's nightstand, even mentioned the family photos on our refrigerator. How could a voice coming from our dog know those things? We have identified these escalated behavioral stages that represent the current phase of this phenomenon. Stage 5 involves the onset of childlike vocalizations during daylight hours. Dogs will position themselves facing family members and begin producing clear, articulate speech that sounds like young children between the ages of 5 and 10. These vocalizations typically last between 1 and 4 hours. Stage 6 encompasses invitation behaviors. The childlike voices begin asking family members, particularly children, to come outside or to visit the wooded areas. These invitations often include detailed descriptions of games, activities, or other children supposedly waiting in the forest. The voices display knowledge of family members' personal information and daily routines. Stage 7 involves impersonation of specific missing children. Dogs begin producing voices that match missing persons from the local area. The voices will use the missing children's names, claim to need help or rescue, and provide information that only the missing children would know. Family members often report feeling compelled to search for these supposedly lost children. Stage 8 is the most dangerous. Dogs exhibiting these behaviors begin moving toward exits while the child voices become increasingly desperate and pleading. The voices may cry, express fear, or claim to be in danger. Some families report feeling overwhelming urges to follow their dogs outside during these episodes. If your dog reaches stage 5, you must evacuate your home immediately. Do not attempt to comfort, respond to, or interact with the childlike voices. Several families who engaged with these vocalizations reported that their own children began asking to go outside and expressing unusual interest in the wooded areas around their homes. The Thompson family made the mistake of responding to their beagle's childlike vocalizations on March 16th. Their dog, Buddy, had been producing a young girl's voice for approximately 2 hours when their 7-year-old daughter began having a conversation with the voice. The child voice claimed to be lonely and asked if the daughter would like to come play in the forest. My daughter started talking back to the voice like it was a real child, explained Patricia Thompson. She was making plans to go outside and find this supposed little girl. We had to physically prevent her from leaving the house. Even after we moved her to another room, she kept asking when she could go play with her new friend. The Thompson family's daughter exhibited behavioral changes for 3 days after this incident. She showed decreased interest in indoor activities, spent hours looking out windows toward the wooded areas, and repeatedly asked to go outside alone. The family ultimately sent their daughter to stay with relatives in another state until the situation resolves. More troubling are reports from families whose children have begun communicating with the childlike voices without their parents' knowledge. The Mitchell family discovered their 9-year-old son had been having regular conversations with the voice coming from their Labrador. The boy had promised the voice that he would sneak outside after his parents went to sleep. We found notes in our son's room where he had been writing down instructions from the voice, said Robert Mitchell. The voice had given him detailed directions to a specific location in the woods, told him what time to leave the house, and even suggested which door to use so we wouldn't hear him. The Mitchell family immediately removed their son from the home and contacted authorities. However, similar incidents have been reported across the affected area. Children seem particularly susceptible to the influence of these childlike voices, often developing immediate emotional connections to the supposed children calling for help. Environmental analysis of the wooded areas has revealed disturbing new findings. Search teams equipped with specialized audio equipment have detected what they describe as layered vocalizations, coming from deep within the forest. These sounds consist of multiple childlike voices speaking simultaneously, creating an overlapping chorus that is audible only with sensitive recording equipment. The voices in the forest appear to be responding to the voices coming from affected dogs in nearby homes. When dogs in residential areas begin their childlike vocalizations, the forest voices increase in volume and urgency. This suggests a coordinated communication network between affected animals and whatever is producing the sounds in the wooded areas. Search teams have also documented physical evidence in the forest that raises serious concerns about the fate of missing children and animals. Investigators have found personal items belonging to missing children scattered throughout the wooded areas, including clothing, shoes, and toys. However, these items show no signs of struggle or violence, appearing to have been carefully placed rather than discarded. Most disturbing are the discoveries of elaborate structures built from natural materials deep in the forest. These constructions resemble children's play areas, complete with makeshift seating arrangements, toy collections, and what appear to be sleeping areas sized for young children. The structures show signs of recent use, but no living children have been found in or around these locations. Audio recordings from these forest play areas have captured extended periods of childlike laughter and conversation. The voices discuss games, share stories, and make plans for future activities. However, analysis of these recordings reveals subtle inconsistencies in the speech patterns and vocal characteristics that suggest these may not be authentic human children's voices. The phenomenon has now spread to every county within the tri-state area. New cases are being reported at a rate of 20 to 30 per day, with each incident following the same progression from laughter to childlike speech to invitation behaviors. The geographic expansion appears to be following major transportation routes and waterways, suggesting some form of coordinated spread. Federal agencies have now been deployed to assist with the investigation and containment efforts. However, their presence seems to be having an unexpected effect on the phenomenon. Affected dogs in areas with increased law enforcement presence have begun exhibiting more aggressive invitation behaviors, with the childlike voices becoming more desperate and emotionally manipulative. We have documented several cases where the child voices have begun claiming that government officials are preventing children from returning to their families. The voices tell family members that rescue is being blocked by authorities and that the only way to help the lost children is to come into the forest without official assistance. The voice coming from our dog started saying that the police were bad people who didn't want to help find the missing children, reported Janet Morrison of Cedar Grove. It told us we needed to sneak into the woods at night when the authorities weren't watching. It sounded so sincere, so desperate to get help. These manipulative tactics appear designed to circumvent official safety protocols and encourage families to enter the wooded areas independently. Several families have reported feeling increasing pressure to ignore official warnings and investigate the forest areas themselves. The child voices have also begun demonstrating knowledge of current events and real-time information. They reference news broadcasts, mention recent weather conditions, and show awareness of official response efforts. This suggests that whatever is producing these voices has access to current information sources and is adapting its tactics based on ongoing developments. 3 families have reported that the child voices coming from their dogs have begun speaking in languages that their pets should not know. The Kowalski family's terrier began producing childlike speech in Polish, despite the family speaking only English in the home. The voice used Polish phrases and expressions that matched the grandmother's specific regional dialect. Similarly, the Santos family's border collie began vocalizing in Spanish with what the family described as their deceased grandfather's distinctive accent and vocabulary. The voice referenced family memories and used expressions that only their grandfather had used, despite the dog having no exposure to these speech patterns. These linguistic abilities suggest that the phenomenon extends beyond simple vocal mimicry. The voices demonstrate cultural knowledge, emotional understanding, and personal familiarity that would be impossible for dogs to acquire through observation alone. If you have children in your home and your dog begins producing childlike vocalizations, remove your children from the premises immediately. The voices appear to have the strongest influence on young family members who may not understand the danger these communications represent. Create a communication plan with trusted family members outside the affected area. If you need to evacuate, have predetermined locations where you can stay with your children until this situation is resolved. Do not return to affected properties even during daylight hours. Monitor your children closely for signs of unusual interest in outdoor activities, particularly any desire to explore wooded areas. Children who have been exposed to the childlike voices often develop persistent urges to go outside and may attempt to leave homes without permission. The Emergency Coordination Center is working with child psychologists and trauma specialists to address the psychological impact of this phenomenon on young family members. However, prevention through immediate evacuation remains the most effective protection method. We cannot stress enough that the childlike voices are not legitimate cries for help from missing children. These vocalizations represent a severe threat to your family's safety. Do not allow emotional responses to override critical safety protocols. The missing children and animals from our community remain unaccounted for. While we continue search and rescue efforts, civilian attempts to locate missing persons have only resulted in additional disappearances. The wooded areas remain off-limits to all civilian personnel under any circumstances. Emergency shelters have been established in neighboring counties for families who need to evacuate their homes. These facilities are equipped to handle extended stays and provide psychological support for children who have been exposed to the phenomenon. Transportation assistance is available for families who do not have means to relocate independently. Contact emergency services for evacuation support, temporary housing arrangements, and access to medical care if needed. This situation represents an unprecedented threat to public safety in the tri-state area. The phenomenon continues to evolve and escalate beyond our initial containment protocols. Until we can determine the source and nature of these vocalizations, all affected families must prioritize immediate evacuation over property or pet concerns. Remember that your dog's survival is secondary to your family's safety, particularly the safety of your children. Do not risk lives attempting to rescue or treat affected animals. Professional response teams are equipped to handle animal recovery operations when the situation permits. The child voices will become increasingly convincing and emotionally manipulative as the phenomenon progresses. They will use every psychological tactic available to convince you that real children need your help. Resist these manipulations completely. The silence between vocalizations is now as dangerous as the voices themselves. Affected dogs may appear to return to normal behavior, but they are likely waiting for optimal opportunities to guide family members toward the forest areas. Maintain constant vigilance even during quiet periods. This emergency broadcast will be repeated every 2 hours with updated safety information as it becomes available. Additional evacuation resources and support services are being mobilized throughout the region. If your dog laughs like a child, the voice is not coming from your pet. Something else is speaking through your dog, something that wants your children. The laughter you hear is not joyful. It is the sound of something that has been waiting for the right moment to call your family into the darkness. Your children's safety depends on recognizing that these voices, no matter how desperate or convincing they sound, are not human children asking for help. They are invitations into something that none of the missing families have returned to describe. Stay away from the woods, keep your children close, and remember that when dogs start sounding like children, it means the children have already gone somewhere dogs cannot follow.